Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Moore. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, I've spent most of this fall avoiding Northwestern football pretty much intentionally. And after doing some show prep for this episode, I feel extremely validated in the choice that I have made all fall, and I'm questioning some of the choices I'm making this week.
Yeah, we finally got over the Iowa hump, only to land like smack dab face first into Northwestern. And it's not a great time, but we plow through competitive stamina, as Ryan Day likes to talk about. We need to use that same forthrightfulness and that same motivation, and not take any weeks off, not look ahead. We do the one thing we do not do at this show is ever look ahead. Also, don't forget to check out our questions, listener questions about the Michigan game coming up that we dropped yesterday.
They're playing Michigan this week, right? Is that?
No.
We're a Rutgers podcast now, is that correct?
Yes, right. Yeah, that's one way to do it. You just carpet bag every single team that Michigan is playing that week, and then that's the team that you cover, and you do it as best you can. And with a lot of the Big Ten teams, you'd have to do it by holding your nose. Like, the fun would be coming up with all of the different show names and, things like that. How many plays on words can you come up with for the Hawkeyes or the Scarlet Knights? Tom, it's just too much. I don't want to talk about it anymore. We've already got let's just stick to the Northwestern thing, competitive stamina. But first, Tom, weather. That's the biggest factor. Everybody wants to know about the weather, Tom. We'll have a better idea Saturday morning when we're there. But my phone and my computer both say rain in the morning, then like cloudy, but windy throughout the whole thing. So
yes, and when you don't have anything to talk about with someone, you're just making awkward small talk. What do you talk about, Tony? Well, here we are. Boy, sure is a windy one, huh? Ooh, oh boy. I'm going to be down on the field. I'm going to look like I'm doing the mime walking against the wind thing, but I may actually be doing the walking against the wind thing and not be miming it. He's screaming a lot for a mime, isn't he? That's how things are sometimes. Yeah, it is. It should be an adventure on Saturday, and they're talking about it being 30-mile-an-hour winds or something like that. And I think the Michigan State game was something like, on the box score it listed it as 15-mile-an-hour, 18-mile-an-hour winds, and that was pretty blustery, but that didn't prevent Ohio State from throwing the ball that day. And, we'll see. If you have not been to Ryan Field before, it is right on the lake. It is, you're going to get some, however windy it is, 10 miles inland from Lake Michigan, it's going to be windier at Ryan Field. So, I can't imagine Northwestern's passing offense is going to be particularly efficient. CJ Stroud should be a little better equipped to cut the ball through the wind than anyone that Northwestern might be rolling out there on Saturday. But yeah, it feels like that this is something where it's not going to decide the game, certainly, but it may impact how the game plays out a little bit.
Ryan Day was asked about the weather on Thursday. How do you prepare for it? What do you do? And he's like, well, being in the Midwest, we don't really worry about it a week out. And it's like, it doesn't matter what anybody says a week out, this time of year especially. You start worrying about it more towards the middle of the week, and then you start to prepare for it as you get even closer. So that's from Thursday to Saturday. They're talking about, okay, this is what it's going to be looking like. So we need to adjust some things, and where they may have come in wanting to open up throwing in order to run, they may have to let's get some more run plays in there. Let's get the guys prepared for that. Let's scrap this piece that we were talking about because it doesn't feel like it's going to work. He also said they've practiced outside, and it's been windy in Ohio the last couple of weeks here and there, so they've gotten that kind of experience and exposure for their team. He mentioned that they also will practice with wet footballs. They'll squirt water on the balls before a snap, but they don't do it throughout the entire practice because the balls will get waterlogged, and then that changes the throwing motion for the quarterback because the ball gets heavier. So it's you've got to balance that with getting them ready for any kind of condition. So they're preparing for it, and they're going to talk more and more about what they need to do. But really, it's like then you get there and you find out what is really going on, and then you adjust from there. So that's not what's going to decide the game. I think that's what decides the margin.
Yeah, and if it's dry and just windy, Ohio State has done that play. I mean, Ohio State passed for a touchdown when it was dry and windy at Illinois in 2011. So if the 2011 Buckeyes could pass for a touchdown in the state of Illinois on a windy day, I have tremendous faith that the 2022 Buckeyes could do the same. We were talking before the show, and I said, I think in lieu of commentary, I'm just going to read like horrendous notes from the Northwestern game notes in lieu of any kind of actual commentary on this game, because it's just, you started going through this, it was like, oh no, like, oh no, oh Lord. And this is what their PR department has come up with. So, Tony, speaking of passing for touchdowns, quarterback Brendan Sullivan is the first player to pass for a touchdown in each of his first 3 appearances with Northwestern since Trevor Siemian in 2011. That's one of those, like, that feels like that should have happened several times. Not just one touchdown in his first 3 appearances. That feels like that should have happened maybe more often than that. I would imagine Ohio State has done that. How many Ohio State quarterbacks have done that? Probably over that time span. This is appearances, so if you just came in for 3 snaps at the beginning, okay, but that feels like you've probably seen many Ohio State quarterbacks do that over the years.
I'm guessing Justin Fields did it.
Justin Fields, JT Barrett, yeah. Yeah,
JT Barrett did, but not CJ Stroud, not Dwayne Haskins, maybe Tate Martell, let's be honest. But yes, certainly been done since Trevor Siemian. Now they have changed the quarterback from Ryan Helinski to Brendan Sullivan. Sullivan is a redshirt freshman who will throw the ball a little bit. He's run the ball over 10 times, I think over 12 times in each of his 3 starts. I think 7 of those were sacks against Iowa, however. So he's mobile, but not impossible to bring down. So that I think that's going to be an interesting watch for the Ohio State defensive line. What may be even more interesting is left tackle Peter Skoronski, who is arguably the number 1 offensive lineman in the upcoming draft. He has, just looking at their game notes, and I've written this down, he's allowed 4 pressures on his 362 pass block attempts on the pass drops this year that he's been part of. He's allowed just 4 pressures, nothing about any sacks there. So you're talking about JT Tuimoloau, Zach Harrison, Jack Sawyer, stuff like that. Or maybe this is one of those where Zach Harrison moves inside and you pair him up with a JT Tuimoloau on that same side. And so he's the number 1 ranked pass blocker according to PFF, everybody's favorite. He's the number 5 ranked run blocker, so he's a complete guy. But he's just one complete guy, and it's everywhere else that is the issue.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. That's going to be good film for him or JT Tuimoloau or Zach Harrison or whoever's lined up over him, because that'll be the individual battle to watch for sure when Northwestern's on the field. Because I don't feel like there's going to be a lot of, I don't know that the all-22 is going to be all that interesting when Northwestern's on the field, but you might learn some stuff just watching that one-on-one battle with Skoronski and whoever he's going up against. And I would think, we didn't get a chance to talk to Zach Harrison this week, but I would think, if that's going to be someone he's going up against, that's a real opportunity to put some really good film out there. He's had a good, productive season this year, and is certainly in that NFL draft conversation for next year. And, if you have good reps on tape against a guy who is being talked about as a potential first-round pick, that is only going to help your draft stock. So, it's easy to sort of look at this and go, have you looked at Northwestern's record and remember that they haven't won a game since week 0, and they haven't played a ton of great teams since week 0, and they still haven't won a game since week 0. And it's easy to look at this and go, this is a virtually meaningless game. This could be a very meaningful game for Zach Harrison or JT Tuimoloau or whoever ends up lining up over Skoronski if they can have a productive game.
It's a meaningful game for running back Evan Hall, who, and I'm just going to assume this, even though I didn't see this anywhere in Northwestern's notes, and if they missed this, then they should all be fired. But Evan Hall has a 200-yard receiving game this year. He had a 200-yard rushing game last year. I'm just going to assume he's the first Big Ten player to have one of each of those, because they're both rare. One is the receiving is more rare than the running back than the rushing. But how many running backs, Tom, have you seen over the years catch enough post over 200 yards receiving? He had 14 catches against Duke for 213 yards. I don't recall any 200-yard receiving days for running backs. And one other thing, he's just one of 6 players in the FBS since 2000 to have 550 yards rushing and 450 yards receiving through this team's first 8 games. Buckeye fans will remember Curtis Samuel doing that in 2016. Saquon Barkley did it. Travis Etienne did it. And TJ Foster for Arizona State. And then a name that I had completely forgotten about from 2007, BYU, Harvey Unga. Another fantastic fantasy weapon from back in the day.
And I'm just trying to think through running back. You're not going to have a wide receiver who's had 200 yards rushing. So I feel like it has to be a running back with 200 yards receiving.
Antoine Randall, I doubt did it, you know.
Yeah. And Donovan Edwards against Maryland last year had I think it was 160 something or 170 something yards receiving. But, you know, that was such an outlier game as a receiving, you know, catching the ball out of the backfield. And, you know, he was 30, 40 yards short there. Yeah, I can't think of a running back who's had that kind of day. And I'm sure, you know, half the time this is like, you know, there was a guy on Buffalo who did it 5 years ago and you just forgot. But yeah, I mean, to do it at this level, that's impressive. And, you know, Duke is not the most amazing team in the world, but they're okay. And they have their head coach is a defensive guy, so you know that's a pretty significant achievement. And yes, I'm scrolling through the notes right now, looking for that note, and I saw a Mr. 200 note, and I thought, aha, here it is. Tony has just missed it. No, Pat Fitzgerald's 200th career win happened in week 0 against Nebraska. Good news, Tony. They haven't had to update that in the 7 games that have happened since.
That's so typical of Pat Fitzgerald, me first guy. He's got a running back who should actually be Mr. 200. And he's like, no, I'm Mr. 200. But Evan Hall this season, only averaging like 4.3 yards per carry or something like that. He's like 6th in the Big Ten in rushing attempts. I think he's maybe 8th in rushing, and then way down the list, like 28th or something in yards per carry. There's just not a lot of room for him to run. Now, he's a very dangerous guy, and he can bust one, obviously running or receiving. So he's going to be the focal point for the Ohio State defense. And, you know, you contain him and you will contain the Northwestern offense. Also, if you don't contain him, you can still contain the Northwestern offense, just in case you were wondering. Like, looking at the numbers this year, the 2 times he's gone over 100 yards rushing 3 times. They've scored 31, 24, and 24, and those are their best outings, and that's basically all they're scoring. So, in his 200-yard day, they scored 23. So, like, they're getting the most that they can out of this guy, and it's still only 24 points against teams like Maryland and Southern Illinois and Duke and Nebraska. So even if Ohio State gives up to 100 yards to him, you know, you're talking maybe 17 tops. Like, you've turned in your prediction, right, Tom?
I have not. Yeah, I have not, but I'll think it through. It's been a week, Tony. It has been a week. I think one thing you're given a lot of top line numbers there, and it's like, oh, these are pretty impressive numbers. Well, here's an interesting stat that provides a little context around some of those numbers. Northwestern has run an average of 76.6 plays through its first 8 games of 2022. That is 22nd in the nation, 4th in the Big Ten behind Indiana, Purdue, and Illinois. So, I mean, Northwestern will run tempo, which is great, except if your offense can't stay on the field, then it means you're having really short possessions, but you're getting a lot of snaps. And that has sort of been how a lot of these games have gone for them this year. So, you know, I think this is one of these great examples of sometimes per play stats are more telling than, overall total game stats. But, I mean, there are some weapons here. It's unquestionably there are some weapons here for Northwestern, but it's like they have there's this one guy on the offensive line who's good. Hey, there's this guy out of the backfield who's pretty good. Okay. You start running out of guys pretty quickly. Tony, here's a fun fact. Do you know the last time Northwestern scored 60 points in a football game? I will give you the hint, it was a Big Ten game.
Was it a several overtime game?
No.
Was it an Illinois game?
It was an Illinois game.
Oh, really? Wow. I do not know what year, though. It wasn't, let's say 2000.
2000. 11-18, 2000. Yeah, so it would have been, Kevin Wilson was probably on that staff, I think, at that point, right? Or no, was he already in Oklahoma?
I don't know. That's the same year, they beat Michigan, 50-48?
54-51. Yeah, that was it was the Anthony Thomas fumble game. Yeah, they beat Illinois 61-23 that year. So, yeah, it is...
Tom, that is one of my examples of why I say bad offense is a choice, because those Northwestern offenses were able to move the ball. They've had other Northwestern offenses where they run the spread and they move the ball. And then you have places like Iowa or Northwestern for the last 3 or 4 years, even though they make it to the Big Ten championship game. It's just, you have these examples of offenses that will work at places like Northwestern, at places like Purdue. And if you don't do it, then, we've spent enough time on Iowa, but just those Northwestern teams are really, really fun to watch, really exciting, could move the ball, could spread you out. And I think if Pat Fitzgerald can get back to that, you can make some waves in the final year of the Big Ten West next year.
Yeah. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I am at the point. I feel like Northwestern always has this cycle where it's like right when you're like, oh, this might be it for Pat Fitzgerald, they just pull the 10-win season out of thin air. And I audibly gasped when I saw 2021 Citrus Bowl champion Northwestern in the notes this week. It was like, I mean, I know the 2020 season was a mess, and there's a bunch of it that it was so weird and disheveled that you don't remember it. I mean, I know Northwestern was in the Big Ten championship game. I remember I was there. I have no recollection whatsoever of Northwestern, being in the Citrus Bowl and then, also winning the Citrus Bowl that year. That feels like a long time ago. And I don't know how much Northwestern got to the Big Ten championship game in 2018. They got there in 2020. They're obviously not going to get there this year, but I don't know how much of that 2020 season to chalk up to it was a weird year, so a bunch of weird stuff happened. Like Indiana was really good in 2020 as well. Sometimes it was just who didn't get COVID at a bad time. Like there was some stuff that year that you kind of you wonder how much it really means moving forward in terms of the program and the health of the program and all that kind of stuff. I do wonder how long Pat Fitzgerald's leash is at Northwestern. I mean, he seems like, the native son, the, Butkus award-winning linebacker. He's been there 17 years. Like, I would not have, just thinking about it, I would have said, 12, something like that. Yeah, 17 years. I assume he's not on any kind of real serious hot seat, but you do wonder, okay, they were bad last year. They're bad this year. If they're bad next year, do you start having those conversations? Is that a time for a change thing? I don't know quite how to assess where he is as a coach with that program.
Yeah, I have that same problem. I think he should be doing more because he's shown he can, but can anybody else do more? And that's when you run into the Glenn Mason issue. Well, Randy Walker did very well there. Randy Walker may have been one of the best Big Ten coaches we've ever seen. We don't know because he passed away before he was able to really show what he could do fully. But Pat Fitzgerald doing something at Northwestern that nobody else has ever done. So there's credit there. I think this is one of those programs, and like most in the Big Ten West and some in the Big Ten East, where you need the right combination of fifth-year guys, fourth-year guys blossoming at the same time, gelling. They've been around, they're experienced, they're smart, they don't make stupid mistakes. And you've got just some random playmakers that were under-recruited who have exploded and came up, like I mentioned a Damian Anderson or a Darnell Autry from back in Pat Fitzgerald's day. But they've had some really good quarterbacks over the years. Do you recall who their quarterback was in that Citrus Bowl?
In the 2020 season? I'm starting to wonder if I have like an eternal eternal whatever of the spotless mind thing going on with Northwestern, because I don't know. I mean, again, literally, we covered that game. We talked about those players. We watched them play in person. I don't know that I could name two players off of that 2020 Northwestern team right now.
I have Northwestern blindness.
Yeah. You know what? That's that's one of those that may be a feature, not a bug things. I'm going through. It wasn't Thompson, the guy who transferred back from Clemson, right? No,
it wasn't Hunter Johnson. It was another transfer though, from Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
Who's your blindness to?
The guy. Once they get to Northwestern, Tony, it's just
Peyton Ramsey.
Peyton Ramsey. There you go. Sure. Tony, let me be the first to say, if you say so, all right.
Because I was looking like, who was the quarterback for that game? Because it seemed like so long ago, and I looked like Peyton Ramsey. Didn't he play at Indiana like a decade ago? And then you scroll back and like, yeah, well, not a decade ago, but in the previous decade he was there. But that's the kind of thing that when it pays off for a Northwestern, that may be how they have to survive if they can't find the right quarterback, where you go get a guy like that. You go get a Cade McNamara, something like that. Now, if Brendan Sullivan, being a redshirt freshman, if he's the guy, then they are set for the next 3 years. And a lot of you need that Drew Tate guy that isn't good enough to go anywhere else, but is good enough for you. And then you kind of don't have to worry about that position for a while, and they can grow and lead. And if they can make plays, all the better, because we've seen what happens when they have quarterbacks that can't make plays and they can't do anything. And so if you at least have that quarterback, you've got a fighting chance, and then you can develop the offensive lines with the coaching, and you've got a defensive minded coach, and you've got a team that is just, they're a bunch of smart guys. We know that. And so they're not going to make a bunch of mistakes. They don't commit a lot of penalties. So if you just have a quarterback that can make plays and other guys that don't mess up in the Big Ten West, that can do pretty good. How much longer that Big Ten West is around, I think it's just going to be around one more year. And then who knows what happens to all of these Big Ten West programs that had their chance, and now what happens to them?
Well, it does feel like, you go through the years in Northwestern. When Northwestern won the Big Ten in 1995 and 1996, they did it in the 2 years that they didn't play Ohio State. And that, was that a coincidence? Well, Tony, we couldn't possibly say for sure, but it feels like it might not have been a coincidence. And then, they have kind of had the year where the good Northwestern year is 10-2 and they go to the Citrus Bowl. But 10-2 and you go to the Citrus Bowl is okay, and that's enough to get you to Indianapolis if you're in the Big Ten West and everyone is, 6-2 or worse in the Big Ten West. You can get there. It feels like Northwestern should really do their very best to make it to Indianapolis next year under the final season of the current alignment, because I think that road's going to get a lot more difficult. If you're playing Michigan more, you're playing Penn State more, you're playing Ohio State more, you've got USC on the schedule, you got UCLA potentially on the schedule, and also you're competing with all of those teams for a Big Ten championship game berth now. You can't just squeak your way in on a 4-way tiebreaker out of the West when everyone is, everyone's kind of just okay but not great. You're now competing against Michigan and Ohio State for that one of those berths starting in 2024. So frankly, the whole Big Ten West feels like they are the losers in the that format going away, because someone had to get it every year. Someone had to represent the West every year, and now that's not going to be true, and the road gets a lot harder. It's a lot easier for some of those teams in the East and a lot harder for some of those teams in the West.
Well, and one of the reasons Ryan Day likes the expanded playoff is because he said it, like, we would probably be there every year. his words, like it's going to be difficult for Ohio State not to make the playoffs. With this, with the getting rid of the divisions, I think what you're going to see is a situation similar to when Urban Meyer took over Ohio State. He raised up the rest of the Big Ten. You can only lift it up so much, but the rest of the Big Ten, like those West teams, can no longer be like, we only have to be the best of the West. It's the whole, we don't have to be the fastest person. We just don't have to be the slowest. And if you're being chased by a bear or whatever, now you have to be one of the two fastest. And that means you've got to be faster than 14 other teams. So you better start putting all of that money into it to get there. And I think you'll see that programs will do that. Northwestern's getting a new stadium, for instance. Now, will that turn into wins? Yeah. Well, is it a maybe now?
Well, they had to get it. It had to get approved by the Evanston City Council, which I'm sure is. You may have elements of NIMBY in the Evanston City Council, and that's just me speculating based on it being Evanston and all that, and also you've got to pay for. I mean, honestly, you've got to pay for the $800 million stadium, but for Northwestern, getting it through the Evanston City Council might legitimately be the more daunting of those two things.
Might cost another $800 million. Wink. Let's talk quickly about the Ohio State offense because they will be dealing with some weather. But C.J. Stroud, Travion Henderson, we've said this on the Bold Prediction Show. I don't think either of us are expecting Mayan Williams. One of your bold predictions, I believe, was Chip Trayanum will lead the team in rushing, lead the Buckeyes in rushing. Who do you think has the most carries? I'll say Travion Henderson, I think, but I feel like it's going to be like 12, 11, 13, something like that, where three guys are going to be all around, and it's just who has the ball last or whatever, something like that.
That feels exactly right. Three guys in the 10 to 13 carry range, 8 to 13 carry range. I wonder if you've got Northwestern, I'm not expecting Northwestern to put up a bunch of points. So if Ohio State's up 24-7 or something like that, or 24-3 or 24-0, if Travion Henderson is your only healthy starting, if you want to call him and Mayan Williams the starting running backs, I think you're going to play him and then you're going to get him out of it. I don't think you're going to see 25 carries out of Travion Henderson on Saturday. So I think the most carries, I'll say Chip Trayanum, but it's going to honestly come down to what order do they play in and who is carrying the ball at the end of the game when they're trying to run out the clock, because you don't have TC Caffey to be the fourth guy and take the 6 carries at the end of the game or something like that. So whoever is probably the third guy off the bench, I guess, is my answer. And I guess I'm going to say it's Chip Trayanum, but I'm not saying that with a tremendous degree of confidence.
There are concerns about ball security with a true freshman like Dallin Hayden and a linebacker in Chip Trayanum, but he's been a running back for a couple of weeks now, and he was a running back, obviously, his first 2 years at Arizona State. So he's been working solely at running back, so I'm sure they're going to be focused on that. I'm sure also they'll be a little concerned about that, especially if the ball is wet and there's some weather concerns. So you might see one of those things where you can tell the running back is like super focused on not fumbling because everything he's doing is with 2 arms, wrapped around the ball. Like even as he's cutting, he's still very protective of that. Tom, let's give our score predictions. I have already sent mine in, so I cannot change it. And I don't want to influence yours, so I will let you go first with what you think is going to happen.
I will give the score prediction, and then I will possibly change it when I send it in. But I will say Ohio State 38, Northwestern 3.
Okay. All right. 38-3. This was a tough one because you don't know what the weather is going to be. And so I think I start out at 35. And like whatever weather, if assuming it's not a monsoon, if it's just rainy and windy, I think they can get to 35. And then it's like, yeah, but that doesn't seem like very much. We've seen them snowball and just pile points on. So I ended up going 49-7. not knowing which score to give to Northwestern. Like, is it a 3? Is it a 0? Is it a 7?
I thought you meant you weren't sure whether to give them the 49 or the 7.
I just saw the number. I'm like, who could this be? It pops in my head. It's nondescript. So tell me who do I assign these numbers to? And I could not get a second voice in my head. So I think they're telling me 49-7, Ohio State with a 49, Northwestern with a 7. But it's 0. Like I said it in when I sent my pick in. I said it in the bold predictions. If there's going to be a shutout, it's going to be this week. But I couldn't do it. And I think by not doing it, I have made it happen. So if I had known that one of your 2-point bold prediction was to pick a shutout, I would have predicted a shutout in my staff picks. Can I still change it? I don't know. It probably wouldn't count.
I'm looking at some of the advanced statistical projections for this game, and a bunch of them are in that kind of like 50-10 kind of range, and those obviously don't take weather into account. So yeah, I mean, I might end up a little bit low on the Ohio State side because if you have a terrible offense, we saw with the Iowa game, even if your defense is okay or your defense is good, you can still give up 54 points if your offense is bad enough. And Northwestern's defense is not good. Northwestern's defense is better than their offense this year, but not good by any means. So, I mean, I may bump that up to 45-3 or something like that when I submit my official picks. But yeah, it feels like you're, unless Ohio State really turns the ball over, gives Northwestern a real short field or something like that. I don't know how Northwestern's consistently scoring. And Tony, do you know how many points Northwestern has? I will tell you, number one, Northwestern has played 8 football games this year. 8. Tony, how many points has Northwestern scored off of turnovers this season?
I will say 3.
Oh, you're such a hater. Tony, they've scored 7 whole points.
Been
outscored 45-7 off of turnovers this year. So, not a big concern that Northwestern's going to score, get a cheap touchdown. That might be a really like low key damning number for exactly how bad they've been on both sides of the ball. Because if you score, you can, if you have a good defense, you can put your offense in position often enough that you can at least be kicking field goals and stuff. And if you have a good offense, you can, any drive you can score points on. So you're going to get some turnovers where that'll turn into points off of turnovers. 7, you've scored once off of a turnover in 8 games. That's yikes.
And this is a Northwestern defense. I'm just looking at some other notes here. The average Pat Fitzgerald defense forces 1.8 turnovers per game. I'm not sure where they are this year. But other poor offensive numbers, and then we can get out of here. I believe Northwestern has scored 143 points on the season. Ohio State this season has scored 124 points in the first quarter.
Northwestern, I was just looking at their points per quarter. Northwestern has scored 24 points per quarter in the first quarter. 124-24. And one of the things that is always kind of a big red flag to me about a team is, and their offense is not even as good as their stats indicate, is when their fourth quarter point total is way higher than the other 3 quarters. Score by quarter, 24, 41, 27, 51. So more than a third of their points have been scored in the fourth quarter, which is generally garbage time. So, or it's Scott Frost is doing something stupid on special teams time, but, also mostly garbage time.
Well, I think, the two look very similar. Tom, anything else before we get out of here?
No, just looking forward to, we'll have a fun weekend in Chicago. We have our usual Hungry Huddle segment. We'll have our usual pregame show or a postgame show, all the fun stuff that, and we'll do our Friday evening, afternoon or evening, depending on what time we actually make it happen, live show. So lots of fun stuff coming up this weekend from the land of Lincoln.
Absolutely. So if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't done so yet, go ahead and subscribe, hit the bell to be notified when we do go live on Friday from wherever we are in the Chicagoland area. Also, please check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. If you're not yet a member, think about it, become a member, see what you what you think, and hit us up there. And we're on the message board. Interact with us there as well, and check out all of the great recruiting information, all of the great team coverage that we have there, the X's and O's as well, continuing to add more X's and O's stuff for the people there as well. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.